All right. Hi, everyone. So today we have Caleb and Cassie here. So could you guys give us a little bit of a self-introduction about yourselves on what you like to do and who you are, as well as what you do?
Of course. My name is Cassie. I grew up a little bit outside of Seattle in Washington and lived there my entire life until going to college. I love rock climbing. That's probably my favorite hobby. In high school, I applied to the Air Force Academy and got in, and that's where I ended up going to college. And so I was at the Air Force Academy for 4 years. My major was legal studies, and then I ended up being a officer in the Space Force. So my specific career field is called space operations.
Sweet. And then I'm Caleb. So I grew up in South Texas, and I applied to the academy the first time out of high school. I didn't get in the first time, so I went to Texas A&M for a year and reapplied to the academy. I ended up getting in the second time and kind of transferred in after 1 year of college. And at the academy, I studied chemistry with a minor in philosophy. I'm also into rock climbing as well. I also like gardening, which is kind of a newfound hobby. And so I am also in the space field as well. I'm just about a year behind Cassie. And so I'm finishing up training here soon, and we'll finally start my job, hopefully in November.
That sounds great. So could you guys tell us a little bit more about the academy you guys went through?
Of course. So the application process is a little bit lengthy, but I think the the anyway for the people that actually take the effort to go through the entirety of the admissions process, I think a fairly large percentage of people do end up getting in. So don't be scared by the application. If you're interested, just, I don't know, put in the work, do the whole thing. And it ended up pretty well for both of us. And like Caleb said, he reapplied the second year and then got in. So that's also an option. While we were there, I guess your freshman year is the one that everybody talks about. It definitely starts out pretty tough, but it gets, I would say, increasingly easier each year. And it's not for everybody, but I had a great experience and I personally would highly recommend it.
Yeah. So like some of the things for the application process is it's just like a normal college application. So you have all the essays, you have all the resumes and letters of recommendation, but some of the additional things that they do is they contact your senator or congressman, and they have to basically give you a nomination to apply to the academy. And so once you have that nomination, then that basically is just another kind of hoop they have to jump through in order to get approved to go to the academy. But it is well worth it. Your education is completely paid for. You have all your meals are free, all your room and board is free, and you even get a little stipend while you're there. So it's certainly, there's a lot of cool experiences that you get to do while you're there. For instance, you can jump out of an airplane 5 times for, just during your summer activities. They also can send you throughout the country to visit different Air Force bases and give you a different idea of what is available as far as careers in the Air Force or Space Force. And so you have a lot of fun opportunities at the academy that you don't always have to seek out, but if you are looking for them, they're definitely there. On top of that, though, there is some extra work you have to do. So at the academy, you have to maintain like a strict like military kind of discipline. You have to maintain athletic, ability. You get tested on athletics every year, and then the academics are pretty rigorous as well. But if you stick through it, it is definitely an amazing place to be from, and you can have a lot of fun while you're there as well. It sets you up for success for sure.
That sounds cool. So let me ask you guys, as compared to a regular college pathway, how would you say this really differs from that in what you do as a part of like the curriculum?
So I think I can comment on that pretty well, just doing like normal college and then the academy. So the way it definitely sets you up for success is that, I guess, because it's a bit more of a disciplined or like rigid schedule that you're doing, it really develops good habits in you for like academics and like a good work ethic. And on top of that, like you have a service commitment after you graduate. So for most careers, it's 5 years active duty with 3 years in the reserve. And then if you go to be a pilot, for instance, then I want to say it's 10 to 12 years, 10 years. So the time kind of changes every now and then. But and like what a lot of people look at that as is just a guaranteed job after college and a good work experience for that. So then if you decided to get out after those 5 years, then you have a lot of experience, you have leadership experience, and you could very easily transition into like a civilian job. Or if you wanted to continue serving in the military, then that's a super easy option to continue doing that as well. But for like
Awesome.
college, you really have to like, it's a lot on you at that point. So you're kind of having to seek out everything yourself and like apply for internships and make sure that you're competitive for those, jobs outside of college. And for instance, so like one of the annoying things while I was at normal college was that you have to basically almost fight to get into your classes versus the academy. Like everything's kind of all set up for you. So there's less stress in certain aspects, but they make it stressful in other aspects. So
You are guaranteed to graduate in 4 years,
mhm.
which is a plus side. And that also goes into, you're also for sure going to get into any classes that you need to get into. So they do that really well. And then I would imagine you're highly encouraged to do about as many like leadership opportunities as you can, which there definitely are leadership opportunities at civilian universities, but perhaps not as many or as
Obvious.
yeah, they're just pretty obvious at the Air Force Academy.
I see. So there's a lot more, it's a bit more diversity in your opportunities then. So let me ask you guys, what kind of candidates are they really looking for, and what kind of students are they looking for, in terms of like the applicants that are selected to go into the program?
So the academy has about 4,000 students, but a lot of students actually play on the sports team. So the Air Force Academy has multiple. Anyway, I think most of the sports teams are Division 1, and so they do recruit a lot of athletes. And because all of this, like none of the students are paying to be there anyway, they tend to recruit more athletes than on like I guess your average college would. So quite a few students do end up going there because of athletics. I would say we both went there not related to our athletic abilities. So I guess I had decent grades in high school. They were pretty good. And you have to take you take sort of a fitness test that goes into your application as well. So I wouldn't say it's important that you're the most fit person, but definitely exercising regularly is moderately important. And then also having, I guess I would say they're probably looking for a well-rounded candidate. So
Yeah.
volunteer experiences, or I guess leadership things that you did in high school or after high school can also be important.
Yeah, I would say like the well-roundedness is definitely the best word for it. Is so they definitely look for good grades in academics and like test scores, so SAT or ACT. And then yeah, if you have good athletics or a good athletic record, that certainly boosts your application, I'm sure. But there are multiple ways to like show that you're in shape essentially. And then especially like the initiative that the applicant takes. So say you like started a blood drive for your school or something like that kind of initiative and leadership role that you play in it is really, I guess, they want to look for that. And so they're yeah, it's very relevant. So ideally like the students that go through the academy are going to one day be leading and like enlisted members of the Air Force if you go through the Air Force Academy or other branches of the military. And so they want to make sure that you like are a good personality fit to do that in the future, I guess.
I see. So it takes into account multiple different facets, and like that well-roundedness is really important.
Absolutely.
So how would you say applicants and students who go through this Air Force program, so after they go through it, how does that really benefit them, and how has it personally benefited you guys in your experiences and your pathway afterwards?
I would say it has set us up really well. Going to civilian universities can also set you up well, depending on what jobs you can get, I guess, with whatever major you chose and that sort of thing. But going to the Air Force Academy, like Caleb said, it is a guaranteed job, which is pretty nice. And then I recently was applying to master's programs, and a lot of them wanted like previous work experience, which I don't have tons of previous work experience because I've only been out of college for a few years. But I used my leadership experiences while in college. And a lot of the programs I was applying to were very receptive to those and accepted them, even though that's not technically sort of in the lines of what they were looking for admission to the program. So that just happened to work out really well for me. It's also, I mean, as being officers in the military, it's a fairly well-paid job. So you're well set up for however many years you choose to be in. And there are, I guess, different retirement programs and ways to save your money wisely so that you can pursue other opportunities if you choose to later as well.
Yeah. Another thing that really attracted me to the academy was that you don't have to pay for the school. So you're graduating debt free versus if, you go to a civilian institution and you have to take out student loans to pay for it, you might be paying those off for the next 10, 20, plus years of your life. And so graduating debt free is, I think, a huge advantage to going there, even though you do have to give the 5 years commitment. But like we said, it's just like it's a job experience, and it's a really good way to start when you don't have to worry about extra bills to pay and what job you're going to have. And honestly, going through the 4 years there, so like Cassie said, about 1,000 to 1,200 people get in each year, and then you probably graduate with around 900 to 1,000 people. And so you've been with those same people for 4 years, and so you're going to be working with them for the next 5 years as well. So it's a really tight knit, small community. And so even though you're going to be kind of spread throughout the country and even the world and different overseas bases, you're still going to see people that you're going to make friends really easily. You're going to have that shared experience, and it's really kind of just a good connection to, I guess, as soon as you graduate from college or entering the world.
Yeah, it sounds like a great opportunity for students to like really hit the ground running after they get out of college.
For
So
sure.
From your guys' experience going through the program, what was really a big tough moment? What was something you guys found very challenging over your experiences?
Most likely the hardest moment for me was one of the, I guess, pretty much all of the military academies have sort of graduation requirements that civilian universities would definitely not have. One of which is, I know for a fact that I believe like West Point, the Army Academy equivalent, and then the Air Force Academy as well, they both have a swim class requirement, which doesn't sound that bad, but it's in fact very bad depending on who you are. And one of the requirements in this class is you have to jump off of was it 10 meter?
Yeah, 10-meter platform.
A 10-meter platform, which is essentially 30 feet off the ground. And I definitely, even though I rock climb, ironically enough, have somewhat of a fear of heights. And so I was very not keen on doing that. And I managed, essentially, you definitely are you're supposed to jump off of that. If you don't, you have to score high enough on all the other events in the class that you don't fail by not doing it, if that makes sense. So every year there are students that refuse to jump off the platform and then end up failing the class because they didn't excel in the other events quite as much as they had to. I was lucky enough to manage to do well enough in the other aspects of the class that I could jump off the 5-meter platform instead and still pass. But that was probably my least favorite class to take at the Air Force Academy. And yeah, anyway.
That's a good question. I would say definitely some parts of freshman year. So kind of just like structure of the academy, you'd have basic starting at the end of June, and you'd have 6 weeks of basic training leading up to the first academic year, which starts in August. So then your first year at the academy is a lot of training and a lot of kind of figuring out military life and making sure you can handle all the stresses of that while also maintaining your academics and your athletic and what ability essentially. And so as you go through the years, that you get more and more freedoms and more kind of privileges. So it gets a little easier in aspects. So it might be easier in military training, but your classes might get harder. So kind of depends. But I would say for a lot of people, one of the big struggles is just that first basic training. It's pretty grueling physically, but it really puts and emotionally, yeah, and everything essentially. So you're up early every single day. You're going to bed, I would say kind of early, but you don't really know what time it is. So you're just assuming that it's late, and you're pretty much just exhausted the entire time. But so getting through that is just it's a grind essentially. But I would say it's really rewarding when you make it to the end. But I'd say that's a big thing for me is just it's just kind of every day you got to wake up and you're all right, here we go again. And you just got to make it through. So
That's pretty interesting. It's quite different than what a lot of other colleges would give you.
For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not exactly your normal orientation week with
Yeah.
the parents and everything.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So for high school students that would be interested in going along the path of something like the Air Force Academy, what kind of general advice would you give them and what tips would you give them when they're applying?
I would say reach out to I guess as many connections or like people to talk to about it as you can. So get in touch with the admissions office, try and find students, either current students or people that have graduated from there, to try and talk about their experiences. Because I think the people that tend to not do so well are oftentimes the ones that had different expectations of the academy coming in. And so I think giving yourself a really good idea of what you're getting into is a very good idea. And yeah.
So the academy actually has something called the summer seminar. I think it's juniors in high school that can apply for it. And so basically you go, if you get accepted to that, then you go out to the academy for 2 weeks.
I think it's 1 week.
1 week. And that kind of gives you a broad overview of like what life as a cadet is like. And so if there are prospects and interest in it, that's a great thing to apply for. And so all the academies have that as an option. And then I would say like in terms of preparing yourself for like the application, I'd say the biggest thing is like grades and test scores. Those are huge. And then just try and get creative in that, like the volunteer opportunity or the initiative that you kind of come up with to make yourself stand out. That's, I would say, as long as you keep your grades up, that's probably one of the biggest things they probably look at, because academics is probably one of the biggest issues that people face at the academy. That's one of the things that they get kicked out for the most, I'd say.
Yeah. And I would also, if you're lucky enough to have the resources and ability to go visit ahead of time, even if like summer seminar is awesome, I would highly recommend that. I only basically found out about the academy my senior year, so I was too late to do that anyway. But I was able to go visit in person, and that was really what convinced me that I definitely wanted to attend, because I had the opportunity to interact with students, and they offer tours very regularly. And I thought that the tours were great, and you can really see the campus and see what it's all about. And I thought that was also a great experience.
Yeah,
that sounds great. So let me take up the questions a little bit more about now. What have you guys so what was your path out of the academy? Where did that really help you in pursuing where you guys are right now?
So while you're at the academy, they sort of I guess rank people in terms of all sorts of different things. So your academics, they somehow rank your military and leadership experiences, as well as your, I guess, like physical GPA, and all of those things go into, they are taken into account for like a graduation order of, they essentially just rank everybody. And that ranking impacts what job you get, because you sort of list all your preferences of the jobs that you want. There's typically probably 30 or 40 options.
Yeah, just about, I would say,
of different jobs in the Air Force and the Space Force that you can sort of say that you are interested in doing after graduation. And the better you've performed at the academy, the more likely you are to get a job that is high on your list, especially if it's something that there's not very many spots for. And so anyway, I guess after graduation, we were both put into the space operations career field. And once you're commissioned in graduation, you get a few months of time off. And then for our career field, there's 6 months of training that happens in California. And then after being in California for a little while, you're assigned to another base. And I was assigned to Schriever Space Force Base, which is in Colorado Springs. So right back next to the academy, funnily enough. And then since Caleb and I were married, he also was put back here with me. And I guess since being here, we did about another 6 months of training, which Caleb is actually still in. And then you just start your career field after that.
Yeah. So like one of the things for us when we were graduating and figuring out what job we wanted to apply for, we really prioritized like our relationship and we wanted to have a family together. And so space is a really good career field for that because most all the bases are stateside. So you're really not going to be deployed. Like there's one aspect of the Space Force that does deploy, but ours is not that. And so we're pretty stationary most of our career, which is really what we wanted. But if you're interested in like traveling the world, for instance, then there are a ton of Air Force jobs that do that. There are bases all over the world. You can go to like Japan, Germany, Italy, literally all over Alaska. Yeah, all over the place. So if your goal is more so like career oriented as opposed to family oriented, then there's a lot of other options for that essentially. But yeah, each one is kind of going to have its own path essentially. Generally, you're going to have some sort of training for your specific job after you graduate, and that'll last from,
it can be anywhere from a few months to some of the pilot training programs ultimately take 2 or 3 years to get through. So those are definitely more time intensive.
Yeah. And there's lots of different paths you can take that really just depends on what you are seeking after. Kind of like I said earlier, the academy actually sends you, I think it's your sophomore summer, you basically go to one of the Air Force bases around the country and learn about all the different jobs that the Air Force offers. So they do give you some sort of exposure to the different options available to you and give you a chance to see, was that something I really want to do?
I see. So what is it that you guys specifically do within the Space Force?
So we basically connect to different antenna sites around the world, and those antenna sites connect to satellites, and then we basically take information from the satellite or we send information to it to make sure everything is operating well. So we do that for the first 8 months to a year, and then generally go into like a supporting role. So like you could schedule all the contacts for the satellite, or you could go to like an engineering support and whatnot. So for us, it's pretty much satellite maintenance, I guess.
And we specifically work with communication satellite constellations. So there's 2 different constellations that our squadron essentially operates all the time. And so I worked with one of them, and then Caleb will be working with the other one.
That's pretty interesting. So on this, like communicating with satellites, what's kind of the future going to look like with this, and how is it really going to change, and what's like the employability in this field? I have quite a few questions on it.
Yeah, that's gonna be a great question because it's definitely it's been around for a while, but it is getting to be a bit of a hot topic now, especially as you get a lot more of the private sector satellites and companies. So what it'll look like in 2, 3, even 5 years, like who knows? It could change drastically. That's a great question. But in terms of like employability, obviously the military is a great place for it, and then with all the emerging satellite companies and just tech companies, like our skill set is also very employable outside in the civilian sector.
The military is also very interested in sort of taking inspiration from these civilian companies. The military, there's just a lot of bureaucracy, and so like the acquisition programs and those sorts of things inhibit a little bit its ability to like be really flexible and get new satellites in a matter of years. Versus there's a lot of up and coming civilian companies in the space industry that are able to create satellites in a matter of a few months and then get them up into space in less than a year, which is pretty impressive. Yeah. And the military is definitely trying to learn as many lessons from these civilian companies as they can and then utilize that themselves. And yeah, like Caleb said, I think our being in the Space Force definitely makes you highly employable outside of the Space Force if you do choose to find another job after the military.
So on working with the satellites and the maintenance, what kind of skills does this require?
Definitely like coding is really useful, although that's not necessary. That's I'm trying to think of what our skill set is, honestly. So
I guess for a lot of most of the career fields coming out of the Air Force Academy, so your academic major oftentimes doesn't actually have a huge impact on the job that you're doing. So for example, I guess unless like Caleb was a chemistry major. So if he had gone on to be a chemist for the Air Force, he would obviously be using his academic major. But I was legal studies, and that's completely unrelated to anything that I'm doing now. So really the training programs that they put you through, the 6 months in California and then the 6 months here, are really, they teach you everything that you need to know to do your job, which is pretty interesting and I think very different than a lot of, I guess, civilian companies typically.
So for because it's a really interesting way you can combine, space as well as computer science and coding. So
Mhm.
for another pathway, like as you mentioned, there's the non-military, the civilian companies. How would that look for people and students who are aspiring to like get into this crossroads between, this space as well as computer science?
So I'd say if you're interested in going like into the space industry from like the civilian side, civilian college side, then really almost any STEM degree is probably desirable. So being really good at math, any kind of engineering, I'm sure would be really desirable.
Especially something like astronautical engineering,
Yeah,
that's highly relevant.
yeah, for sure.
I would imagine that computer science, in addition to some of those, would be also super important. I have a family member who I'm not super close to, but he has a cool space job in a civilian company, and he has, I think he got some sort of astronautical engineering related degree, but he's definitely learning a lot of computer science on the job, and I think he uses both of those in his job. He recently traveled to New Zealand for one of their launches, I think. So, like a job like that sounds pretty amazing and definitely different than what we're doing, but pretty cool nonetheless.
So as kind of like a final big broad question for students who are interested in either going through the pathway of the Air Force Academy or getting into the space as well as computer science like intersection, what general advice do you have for students who are interested in all these different areas?
I would say just remain curious. You have a lot of people that are super passionate about space and they're just fascinated by it. Because I mean, it is super cool when you think about that you're sending these massive things up into space and they're just staying up there kind of on their own. So I would say, and or you think like even the James Webb telescope that just got launched recently, like the amount of information that we collect up there and the way you use that like for scientific research or whatnot, it is really fascinating and it kind of can hopefully shed light on a lot of really tough questions. So I would say the biggest thing is just find something that you're super passionate about and within the space industry or I guess really anything. I think that biggest thing, just be passionate about what you do is I think the biggest thing. Then you're gonna enjoy it a lot more. But if you are interested in space, then you will certainly find a like community of like-minded people who also find it just as fascinating and are willing to nerd out over it the entire day or yeah, just kind of constantly wonder about what's out there really. Who knows?
And I guess mine is somewhat related, but I would say sort of don't stress out about finding like the perfect path to get somewhere.
Yeah,
I
sure.
would say worry less about what exactly like the steps you need to do to get this, I don't know, to get into the Air Force Academy or to eventually work in the space industry. And like Caleb said, I think if you're in high school and really passionate about some sort of cause, go volunteer for that. And I think the more you can, yeah, express your passion, volunteer in different ways, or learn tons about this specific thing. And then I think through your application, hopefully you can show that. And I think that would be something that the Air Force Academy would be really interested in, for example, or space industries. If you're really, I don't know, if you like coding and you do some really cool project, like this, fine. Just, I think it's more, I guess I don't think it would be that difficult to relate your interests and that sort of thing to jobs that you can potentially get in the future. I don't think there's one perfect way to, I guess, get a job in the space industry. There's just so many different options, and it's always changing, that you can sort of find your own path that fits you the best, and then I'm sure it'll get you wherever you need to be in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
That sounds great. And just kind of like as a real final question is if you could go back in time and really tell a younger version of yourself, give yourself some advice, what would it be?
I would personally tell myself stop playing so many video games, but that's just me. I played way too many video games in high school, and I don't really do it at all anymore. So I think if I had done that, I would have had much more of a chance to get out into the world and find out what I was passionate about. Whether that's you're meeting different individuals, or so like now I'm really passionate about gardening and like growing stuff. And in high school, I had no idea that I would have ever enjoyed that because I was probably so stuck in the computer or whatnot. So for me personally, definitely spending that time to just explore different things would have been really helpful in figuring out what I wanted to do in the future, I guess. So just yeah, and I honestly kind of along those lines, I honestly think taking some time off after high school, like say like a gap year, for instance, I think that could be really beneficial for a lot of people. I think you get like a year to mature and one, figure out what you want to do, where you want to go. And it really, I would say, relieves the pressure of those last few years in high school where, yes, a lot of your friends are probably applying and maybe getting into or not getting into the different colleges. But I think taking a moment to just breathe and get out of the craziness of education and then take a step back into it when you're ready would be really beneficial for quite a lot of people.
And on that note, I would recommend finding a way to, like, if you do take a gap year, which I think would be great, probably find a way to structure it. So that you don't sort of, I don't know. I'm sure if I didn't sort of plan ahead for it, I would be like, well, sitting on the couch is pretty nice. Like I'll figure out something to do tomorrow. But like find a way to make it productive. But as far as my advice, my freshman year at the academy, I guess my high school was pretty academically rigorous. So I was pretty confident going into college that I would be able to handle my classes. But honestly, I got to the Air Force Academy, and I think the combination of so many classes and then like immediately hours of things to do after classes, and then just it was all a lot for me. And one class that I struggled in specifically was Calc 2, and I was nervous to ask for help, and then it got to the point where I really didn't want to ask for help because I was like, well, I'm going to need to ask for help with like the entire first half of the class, and that was just going to be too embarrassing. And so I would say, I think I learned my lesson. Just ask for help as early as you can, as often as you can. And I think I was shy of the teacher, and I didn't want the teacher to think that I wasn't smart. And just really, I had, I don't know, a lot of thoughts that didn't matter. And I think I got caught up in myself. But the more able you are to sort of get over yourself and just admit to your weaknesses, or admit to maybe not studying as much as you needed to, and admit to not understanding it, that's completely fine. And it's, I think you're more likely to be respected by asking for help than not by not asking for help. So I would highly recommend through high school, through college, just ask for help as much as you possibly can, because it can generally only end well, I would say.